What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction. In this, we have an upper class Southern British accent from 1673 to 2023. Before we dive into the video, if you guys happen to enjoy, please don't forget to smash subscribe, get a video a thumbs up. Also, if you would like to support this channel by becoming a member, all you gotta do is hit that join button to receive your exclusive benefits. Let's dive right in.
Hello. Feel free to skip to the time on screen if you want to get straight to the point, but please do bear in mind when commenting that there may be something you've missed in the introduction if you do skip. I'm not formally qualified to talk about linguistics, but I've been doing it on this channel for a number of years, and I've collaborated with a few people more qualified than myself, so I've ended up with a misplaced sense that I am qualified, but of course I'm not formally qualified, so if you notice anything that you think is a mistake, by all means put it in the comments and I'll try to address those things. Now, there's a long-standing misconception that posh, upper-class, southeastern British English was somehow invented in the 1700s or 1800s to differentiate it from working class English or to differentiate it from American English, or there are various different explanations people have, and this isn't true. There are certain aspects of upper class or academic or formal speech that do seem to have been cultivated, or people do seem to have tried to push things that weren't naturally there in the language, but the pronunciation system does just seem to be a regional accent that developed naturally in the way that all regional accents do. It just happens to be the one that's gained high prestige in the southeast of England and in England in general. So in this video I wanted to trace the sort of or one iteration of the posh southeastern British accent back through the ages, using the phonetic descriptions that we have from past times. One question I always get when I do videos like this is how could we possibly know what they sounded like before they were audio recordings? And I'll probably do a fuller video on that at some point just to link people to. But the long and short of it is that the way accents sound is a direct product of the way that people move their muscles, their vocal muscles, when they're speaking. That's, when you change what you're doing with your tongue and lips, you change the shape of your vocal tract. And as you change the shape, the resonant frequencies change, so as you blow air through it, different sounds come out. And that is why people have different accents, because they're doing different things with their muscles when they speak. So if you can describe exactly what somebody's doing with their muscles when they speak, you can come out with in theory, a perfect idea of what their accent sounds like impressionistically. And before audio recording, there was a fairly long-standing tradition of grammarians and phoneticians describing their own pronunciation in a mechanical way, in a way that's surprisingly modern in a lot of cases. And this starts to happen around the mid-1500s, and it continues obviously to the present day, because there are still phoneticians writing phonetic descriptions of English. So we can know in a lot more detail than you'd think. And of course, upper class accents are the ones that are most likely to be described by phoneticians, because a lot of people back then were very snobbish and had very prescriptive views about this is how you should speak, and you should avoid speaking like a working class person. So these are the accents that we actually have the most information about. I don't doubt that I'll still get a load of comments like this from people who haven't watched the introduction, but that's impossible to avoid, I think. But anyway, I'm going to go in with a few little reconstructions that I've made myself about, and sort of just go into a little bit of discussion about each one, although hopefully not too long, so that it's not too drawn out. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good Christmas, or whatever you're celebrating or not celebrating at the moment.
I got you.
Hello. I thought I'd better come out and thank you all for coming here to celebrate Christmas with me and my family today. I know some of you have come from the length of the country, some of you have even come from overseas, to stand outside our front door and shout while we celebrate our family Christmas. So I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for coming all this way, and I hope your travels haven't been in vain and that you've enjoyed yourselves. Thank you. I'd seriously.
That's very clear, very concise, very easy for me to understand. I like that. I like that. Yeah, I can rock with that accent. But I like a lot of British accents. Let's keep it going though. See how it changed over the years.
Video on this. But this modern posh accent, the kind that Prince William and Prince Harry have, is a really very modern development. It has a lot of features that weren't very common 70 or 80 years ago. The tongue position is low for the vowel in words like thank. It's thank, rather than the older thank. The word here has a long vowel where the tongue position doesn't move while it's being pronounced. Here, rather than here. Possibly as a result of American influence, this accent has a lot more tapping of the t sound if it comes between a stressed and an unstressed vowel. Better rather than better. What if we jump back 50 years to 1973?
Let's see.
I have always been aware that there's a certain responsibility that comes with the job I have as a film director. And I think, although every year since 1957 I've directed a Christmas film, I think on this occasion, because there was so much backlash last year, I think on this occasion I will hand over the baton, as it were, to my close friend John Wilkinson, who I know will engage with working class issues in a way I wasn't able to last year. And I'm certain that I will return at some stage with a much improved ability to engage with those issues.
There are absolutely moments in there where I thought it was a little American accent. I thought it was a tad bit American for moments in there. Then he said some words, and I was like, that's definitely a British accent. But I can hear some more American in that one to me than the first one.
We think of this as being the same kind of accent as the last one, but in reality it's actually very different on a phonetic level. That cat vowel has a higher tongue position, cat rather than cat. The vowel in words like I starts with a slightly more fronted tongue position, I rather than I. The vowel in words like occasion starts with a higher tongue position, occasion rather than occasion. And words like aware end with a slight off-glide to the vowel, aware rather than aware. Is there such a big change if we jump back 50 years to 1923, still well within the era of audio recording?
A number of my opponents have suggested undoing a lot of the work that we've done so far. And I would say the very idea appalls me, because it would mean disrespecting an enormous amount of work by people who have dedicated their lives, or the better part of their lives, to this cause.
Now that sounds a lot different to me personally than the one from 1973. You jump back 50 years, and that to me sounded completely different.
Carefully, it's a fairly dramatic change all over again.
Yes.
Miles and miles away from the 2020s one.
Yeah,
the I vowel now has a really fronted tongue position, something like I. If a r sound appears between a stressed and unstressed vowel, it can be tapped, very rather than very.
Very.
The goose vowel has a very backed tongue position, oo rather than the more recent oo. The so vowel has a bit more of a fronted onset, so rather than so.
So.
By now, the kit and dress vowels have very tense high tongue positions, I, rather than the modern I, Jumping back 50 more years takes us to the very limit of audio recording, 1873. Although audio recording was in its absolute infancy at this point, having been invented in the late 1850s, we have plenty of speakers who were alive in the 1870s and got recorded when they were older, in the 1920s and 30s. So I'd say that this is the last stage where we can rely on audio recording alone.
Okay.
As I know many of you are aware, I have recently lost my house due to a change in circumstance. As you can imagine, this is far from the way that I would have wanted to spend my Christmas, and I implore you to reinstate me into my previous way of living. If you do, I can assure you I will conduct myself in a rather better way than I had done up to this point.
Maybe not
It
quite.
sounds so sophisticated, so proper, so it's just definitely giving me that posh accent 100%. I love it.
A big jump.
I love
jump
it.
nonetheless.
But it is a jump for sure.
The
Like you
vowel words
said,
like
not a huge one, but nonetheless
goat
a
and
jump.
no now starts with a fairly back tongue position, more similar to how Americans say it nowadays. O rather than O. You can hear this in recordings of people like George V. Some words like lost take a long vowel, lost. Even
Lost.
someone as recent as Queen Elizabeth II retained this in some words. She pronounced often as orphan, but incidentally she said lost rather than lost. The starting point of the house vowel is very backed. Haus. While it might be tempting to put this down to German influence, and it could be, it equally may just have been the way the vowel would have gone anyway. People who know a lot about history but not very much about historical linguistics often have a bias towards thinking that sound changes are obviously a result of foreign influence because of historical events that coincided with them, such as a lot of the Victorian royal family being bilingual English and German speakers. But really, sound changes would happen anyway, and unless there's a very particular systemic reason to think they're a result of foreign influence, you don't really need that to explain them. In this recording there's also less of the tapping, very, and more of a labiodental
Very.
approximant, very. Maybe not quite so much, I should have put it in more to be honest. This r pronunciation, which still exists in some dialects today and is also considered a speech impediment where it occurs in dialects that don't usually have it, was considered an upper class feature in the late 1800s, as reflected in Punch cartoons that show posh people substituting W for R. Given that modern speakers very often misinterpret the labiodental r pronunciation as w, and given that saying very is much more common than saying very, and also given that labiodental realizations of r were common in the 20th century among posh people, it's likely that this is what the Punch cartoons were getting at. Now it's time to go beyond the era of audio recording to 1823.
3 travellers approached the entrance of Canterbury as journeying from Dover in the afternoon of a summer's day, when they found their advance opposed by an immense concourse of people. The crowd was so great that they could not go forward but with extreme difficulty.
On a phonetic level, this isn't
I feel like, again, it is leaning that. I feel like kind of heard some American in that. Also, all I'm saying, kind of heard some American in that.
Each jump is pretty much in line with all the other jumps so far.
Yeah.
Although you might be fooled into thinking it's a big jump because this is an accent that doesn't exist within living memory and therefore doesn't have any existing social connotations anymore. The previous accents we've heard all exist in audio recordings of upper class people, and so we strongly cluster them together as upper class accents. And although this one isn't that different to the others phonetically, because there are no audio recordings of it, our brains don't put it in the same box and it sounds a bit weird. In this clip, the onset of the price vowel has reverted all the way back to a back tongue position, similar to what it now has in the 2020s. I rather than I. Roger Lass in 1999 put together some of the evidence for this, describing 2 different patterns of pronunciation that seemed to go in and out of fashion throughout the 17 and early 1800s. Some people said price and mouth, and this became more dominant towards the era of audio recording. But more popular among phoneticians in the late 1700s and early 1800s was the system in this clip, with 2 back vowels, price, mouth. In Thomas Batchelor's analysis from 1809, he says that the word bite is pronounced like the word but with a y in there, bite. And pound is pronounced like pond, but with a w sound, pond. Even Alexander Ellis, who was born as late as 1814 and is known for being a very good dialect phonetician later in life, makes the same comparison, that the first element of the bite vowel is the same as the but vowel. One other thing I've done is pronounce the ing suffix of journeying like in, journeying.
Although it's more recently become associated with working class accents, this type of thing is associated with posh people in 19th century Punch cartoons, and phoneticians mention it as a normal feature of educated English in the 1600s. The vowel in words like father is also more fronted in this accent, ah rather than ah. What happens if we jump back 50 years to 1773?
On the 5th day of November 1718, which to the era fixed on was as near 9 calendar months as a husband could in reason have expected, was I, Tristram Shandy, gentleman, brought forth into this scurvy and disastrous world. I wish I had been born in the moon, or in any of the planets except Jupiter or Saturn.
In this one,
I feel like I've heard a tad bit of Irish in there. There was like an Irish accent a little bit starting to come through. I may be tripping and I may be the only one, but I feel like I heard a little bit of
we start to hear something that to a modern ear sounds distinctly rural or American or Irish, depending on your perspective.
modern. I guess I got a modern ear. I guess I got a modern ear for sure. I'm glad to know that I'm not tripping though.
What's called rhoticity, pronouncing a r wherever it appears in spelling rather than deleting it in certain situations like most southeastern English people do nowadays. The speaker in this recording sometimes pronounces the r and sometimes doesn't. This mirrors some regional dialects which are still losing their rhoticity, where speakers will sometimes pronounce the r and sometimes drop it. Upper-class British English became non-rhotic gradually over the course of the 1700s, and again, Lass compiles a lot of evidence for this. Mather Flint in 1740 says that r before a consonant is softened and almost mute, and Abraham Tucker, writing in the exact year our clip is set, says that r is lost or pronounced extremely softly before a consonant. I think in the recording I may have slipped up a couple of times and pronounced it before a consonant. Walker in 1790 commented that r should never be pronounced silent, which suggests that A, some people were pronouncing it silently, otherwise he wouldn't feel the need to correct them, and B, that there was still some difficulty accepting this new sound change into educated English. This is one of the changes that makes reconstructed early modern English sound so American. So to emphasise once again, English becoming non-rhotic was definitely not some big conspiracy to make English sound more posh or less American. It's a natural sound change that took a long time to become accepted and may well have started in working class speech before it made its way up the ladder. The face and goat vowels are a lot smoother with less tongue movement, more like e and o rather than a and o. As we'll discover, most phoneticians in the 1600s described them as having these very smooth qualities, and so they were probably gradually moving away from those over the course of the 1700s. I've taken the liberty of moving the tongue position of the cut vowel up slightly here. We know that it started as kut in around 1600, which it still is in the north, and it had lowered to cut by the earliest audio recordings. And we also know that rural dialects near London have an intermediate cut pronunciation, but we don't know how long it took to lower in upper class dialects, so this particular vowel is an educated guess on my part. What if we go back to 1723? There being no natural or divine law for any form of government, or that one person rather than another should have the sovereign administration of affairs, or have power over many thousand different families, who are by nature all equal, being of the same rank, promiscuously born, to the same advantages of nature, and to the use of the same common faculties.
Yeah, if that ain't Irish, bro, to any ear, that's got to sound Irish. That, to a T, to an absolute T, that's got to be Irish.
Impressionistically, this might be the biggest change all in one go. I think part of that is the sudden increase in rhoticity, making it suddenly slot into a different stereotype in our brain. If you're British, it probably sounds rural or West Country or maybe Irish.
If
you're from another part of the hemisphere, you might put it into a different category. The important thing to realise is that our brains are putting these accents into modern social categories that weren't the same back then. What made an accent sound rural or farmerish in the early 1700s must have been different to what makes an accent sound rural nowadays, and when you look at the descriptions of educated phoneticians from back then who explicitly warn against speaking in a rustic or rural way, this is the accent that they seem to be recommending you aim for. So how different actually is it from the last one we looked at, and what were the differences? I've raised the onset of the price vowel. Later, as I said, it's described as I, and in the 1600s it's described as A, and then subsequently A. So I've given an intermediate quality here, back unrounded A. Again, this is an interpolation, and I could be getting the quality slightly wrong in this case, but I think that this value must have existed at some point between 1650 and 1800. The vowel in person is different. Here it's person, like it still is in some Irish accents.
Person.
Mather Flint in 1740 makes clear that this vowel still has a different quality from the vowel in words like fur, whereas they later merged in accents like mine. Person, fur. Again, the vowel in words like rather is a long front vowel. Rather. This is part of a sound change that was ongoing that we now call the trap-bath split. Flint in 1740 describes the state of it then, with words like bath, rather, last, taking a longer and slightly lower vowel than words like cat and bang. Bath, rather, last, but cat, bang. This sound change is described as being especially advanced before r, so the vowel is a bit more backed in the word ar. One thing that might stick out are the pronunciations of the words nature and administration, nature and administration.
Nature.
Again, from Lass's treatment, Robert Nares, much later than this recording in 1784, still recommends this pronunciation of nature, saying that people are at fault if they fail to give the U its full long sound, which he previously defines as U, so altogether nature. Various phoneticians over the years documented the transition from tia clusters to ch. So nature is probably an older, more conservative pronunciation than something like nature, and so it's a safe bet in 1723. The same is true of administration. The sien pronunciation of that ending is more conservative than the more recent shun one. What happens if we jump back one more time to 1673?
And thus ends all that I doubt I shall ever be able to do with my own eyes in the keeping of my journal, I being not able to do it any longer, having done now so long as to undo my eyes almost every time I take a pen in my hand, and therefore, whatever comes of it, I must forbear.
It just sounds like, yeah, y'all started out Irish way back when. And as time went, it became more posh, more sophisticated sounding. I guess the way you speak, more British in a sense, I don't know, as well as a little bit of American.
This doesn't feel too different to the last one, and it slots into the same kinds of stereotypes in our minds. I haven't had to interpolate as much in this one because it's a little way before this recording in the early 1600s and late 1500s that we get a very rich tapestry of phonetic descriptions of upper-class London speech. It's from these descriptions that we're very confident that the trap vowel of this period was still pronounced something like a, like the king still pronounces it today, rather than the lower a quality found in northern England and other parts of Europe. And here I've also added some alveolar taps again for the r sound. Every rather than every.
Every.
I've done this because over the course of the 1600s, phoneticians describe a process of weakening of the r sound when it doesn't come at the start of a word. I've done a video on basically this exact topic, but most modern historical linguists interpret this as a gradual transition from using an alveolar tap or trill, r or r, which is likely to have been common in the 1500s, to using the approximate sound that's common today, r. The reason we think that it was initially a trill in the early 1600s, late 1500s, is because phoneticians tell us it was, and then they start to say that it becomes less firm and more liquid towards the ends of words. It's most straightforward to assume that this means r at the start, r at the end. As the speaker here is supposed to be about my age, I've gone with a more advanced accent that uses an approximant unless it comes immediately before a vowel, in which case I use a tap. You'll also notice some tapping of t sounds. Instead of saying that I say that I. I said that this exists in modern posh accents, possibly as a result of American influence. Well, where did it come from in American English to begin with?
That's a good question.
Because T-tapping exists so widely in American, Australian and Irish English, I think it's possible, perhaps even likely, that it's existed in 1600s London English, although I don't think it's explicitly described anywhere, so on second thought maybe it was a working class feature. The vowel in words like able is much lower. Able.
Able.
Phoneticians show a range of qualities for this sound because it had only recently raised from able, which was how it was pronounced in Middle English. I've given the price and mouth vowels with central onsets. A, O. As Lass points out, most phoneticians before about 1640 described these vowels as A and O. Praise, mouth. But after 1640 they start to describe the first element as being the same obscure vowel in both, although possibly with a bit more lip rounding in the mouth vowel. Praise, mouth. In principle, you could go back one or two further before the evidence becomes too low resolution to tell much about class differences in pronunciation, but I started doing this too late and now it's 10 PM on Christmas Eve, so I think I'll leave it there.
Got to.
I should say I may soon get a specific email address for work-related stuff, but if anyone was looking for someone to do any kind of dialect coaching for historical projects...
It sounds like he's done talking about the video, but I feel like it was a great video. I don't know much about phonetics. I don't know much about linguistics. I don't know much about accents. But to me, it just kind of sounded like towards 1673, 1700s, it was kind of a more Irish accent to my ear. And it just came more British, English, more Americanish as in a sense. But y'all let me know what y'all think. If you guys enjoyed, please don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the next one. And I'll see y'all next time.